Welcome, everybody, to the Inner Carnivore podcast, episode 14, with my special guest, Alex Ball. Before we get started, no matter whether you guys are listening on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, or watching the full video on YouTube, if you could do a huge favor, like, subscribe, comment, leave a review. It helps out a ton and really, really appreciate it. So jumping right in, Alex, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be here. I'm so excited. We've been trying to make this happen for a little while, so I'm really thankful that finally we're here talking and ready to catch up on all the things carnivore and maybe not carnivore.
Right? How dare we?
I
Uh,
know.
for those of you who don't follow Alex or don't know about her, her handle is healing by the sun, right? Or healing by
All one
sun.
word. Healing by the sun. On
All
Instagram.
healing by the sun, which gives you a little bit of indication as to kind of the path that we will go down, but also makes absolutely fantastic food, which I also want to get into. Maybe not necessarily strict carnivore, but then again, neither do I make food that is very strict carnivore. Uh, but jumping in, like we talked a little bit about your story, your past, how you kind of got to where you are. A quick overview for people who don't know, haven't heard some of the podcasts that you've been on. How did you get to the point to where you started this Instagram page? You started the type of eating and the type of strategy that you have to address some of the health issues that you're after.
Definitely. So I have kind of a wild and winding journey, but essentially I found animal based when I was at the rock bottom of my health and finally realized I had to become my own health advocate and that just mainstream medicine was not going to cut it because it wasn't working up to that point. I grew up both in a mold infested house that was causing me a lot of bad symptoms like brain fog and chronic sinus issues, a lot of skin issues, things like that. But again, I could never pinpoint where they were coming from because I ate a relatively, healthy, what would be deemed as a healthy diet and was active and, led a normal kind of life as a kid, but could not figure out what was going on. And anytime I would go to a doctor, they would chronically, again and again and again, put me on antibiotics, one after the other. When one wouldn't work, try a different one. And I actually developed a severe resistance to basically 95% of antibiotics that we use for most common issues today with infection. And I have something which a lot of people will know, staph, and I get these reoccurring boils and other skin issues that come back because once you get staph in your system, you can pretty much guarantee you'll have it forever. Once it gets into your bloodstream, it can be very dangerous because it can spread throughout the whole body. But doctors, again, that I would see were convinced that they could find one new antibiotic that would get rid of the staph infection in my body. And every time they'd try, it wouldn't work. And I was just getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And of course, as people know, antibiotics are very, very potent and strong, and they will wipe out the gut microbiome. They will just completely wreck your body. So for years, all through middle school, all through high school, every time I'd go on a round of these antibiotics, I would face terrible digestive distress, like not to be a TMI, but constipation, bloating. Again, just so many issues because my body was getting pounded time and time again by antibiotics that both weren't working and were just hurting my system more and more. So I started seeking out, I'm like, there's got to be another way for me to start getting better. And I found veganism. And so I thought that veganism was going to be the cure all to this and would heal my gut and would help me with my skin. And I heard all these amazing things. And I was doing a lot of endurance work. I did triathlons and endurance, like marathons, everything all through college. So a lot of endurance athletics. So you take immense stress on the body, taxing the body with all of that exercise, you take an extreme vegan diet, which I was on for over 8 years long, convinced that it was somehow going to make me better, even though every year it was making things worse. When it comes to your gut and everything, shoving in kale smoothies, all of that fiber and roughage, every supplement under the sun because I was so nutrient deficient. So I was doing all of that and I was just getting worse and worse and worse. This was all through college and after college. And eventually my body just had enough and I completely crashed. I had to quit all the athletics I was doing. I had started having severe symptoms of just chronic fatigue, inflammation. I was having trouble holding my job down because I just couldn't even think straight. I was so just again at a rock bottom because both from a nutrition perspective and from everything my body had faced up to this point with both exercise stress and life stress of, the antibiotics and being sick all the time and all of that, I didn't know what to do. So I went through a really tough period of a couple years where, it was, I would say a full year and a half, 2 years. This was all during the pandemic where we were, all locked in and contained. And I was very depressed and down because I thought there's nothing I can do. My health is is tanking and this may be my last, I may die at some point. I was in such pain at that point at about age 23. So eventually, through all of my research again, kind of realized I'm going to have to be in the driver's seat of if I literally live or die at this point, because I'm getting to the point where I spend 90% of time in bed because I'm so sick now. And I started learning about animal based, about actually the healing power and ability of animal foods. I started getting some blood work done, realized how severely deficient I was from so many years chronically vegan and things like B12 and iron. My iron levels were just plummeted. I was anemic, all of these things. And so I decided, as scary as it was to me, because again, it had been so many years. It had been at that point, because I was vegetarian for a while and then vegan all those years. It had been over 12 years since I had touched like any animal product, eggs, anything. But I knew it was time to try it because I just was seeing all of these healing stories for not just animal based, but carnivore. So I decided I'm going to try and try this trajectory of really gently easing in some animal products because I was so frightened. Just because, again, it was this culty dogma that I had been a part of, for so many years and believed in. I hate to say it, but it's true. And so I started with eggs and like canned fish, like sardines and everything. You know how I love my sardines. and
Yes.
and then I kind of started working in actual meats, things like a little bit of chicken and then turkey and then finally red meat. And I kid you not, like the first time I had ground beef, it was like my system was just like soaking every bit of it. Like, thank you, something that we can like hold on to that's actually going to heal you, and just felt completely different. So I, even though in the beginning was literally cooking steaks until they were brown because I was so scared, and now I eat them as rare as you can imagine. Now they are just seared and that's it. But you have to start somewhere. So I give young Alex a little grace with the brown, grayish ribeyes. But it brought me to where I am now. So I eventually went after a year and a half animal based. I really felt like this is helping me. I can see improvements in my energy, in my inflammation, in my gut for the first time. My hair, all these things. And so I decided, okay, I want to take the full plunge to carnivore and see, because again, from the stories I'd seen time and time again from people like Courtney Luna and the ones that Sean Baker shares, and just so many stories of powerful healing capabilities of this diet. I went full carnivore, and I was full carnivore for about 9 months. And during that time, had a lot of things again continue to improve energy. I was sleeping for long periods of time throughout the night again and not waking up every hour and things like that. But it eventually kind of slowed a little bit, which again, I don't think that that's caused by carnivore, but something that my hero and a lot of people in the carnivore community will know, Nutrition with Judy, who I have literally been following since the beginning, will say is that carnivore is something that can be such a powerful tool in your tool belt of healing, but a lot of times it can't fully heal when there's a deeper root cause. So for someone like me who has been facing a lot of pretty intense heat, like health issues from a very young age, severe antibiotic resistance, things like this, sometimes carnivore isn't enough on its own. So as of recent, I've had kind of a little bit of a step back. I would say that's going to propel me 3 steps forward, where I found that, carnivore again is something that I can come back to, something I can use, even if I'm not perfect carnivore all the time. But a heavily meat-based diet is a powerful thing for me that I will never stray away from again. My body has to has to eat this way. I know now to flourish. But additionally, there's other things that I'm going to have to go through to continue to improve my health and to rectify some of those issues again that have been so immense over the past couple of years. So that brings us to where we are today. Long, long journey there, but essentially what I'm doing now is I'm trying to deal with something called CIRS, which is chronic inflammatory response syndrome for people that don't know, but it can be brought on like things like chronic stress, mold exposure, those kind of antibiotic abuse, those sort of things can all bring it on. And there's very little things that can help rectify it, but I've been able to find a doctor that does the shoemaker protocol, it's called, which is one of the only effective ways, or the only effective way found to quote unquote cure, I guess, that chronic inflammatory response syndrome fully, along with a typically paired with a fully or heavily meat based or carnivore diet. A lot of people experience tremendous relief again when they have sort of this toolbox where the shoemaker protocol is in there, but additionally, they're pairing that with either a meat based or carnivore diet. Because again, it helps reduce so much of that inflammation in the body, which is very powerful. So,
I got you. That's such a wild journey. And so my question is, obviously you've seen a lot of doctors in that time, right? Like,
yes.
anytime you're dealing with, a lot of antibiotics, you've obviously seen a lot. During that 12 years of vegetarian veganism,
Mhm.
did your doctors ever dive into your diet? Did they ever talk about your diet? Did they ever say, hey, maybe try this? Like, what are you, like, how did those conversations go? Like, how does a conversation go with a doctor where you continually, because I have my own perspective, but most of it's on a physical, like, not necessarily a pathophysiology, but like a mechanism, like body mechanism issues. Um, but how do you continue to have that conversation with the doctor where they keep trying new stuff and they don't dive into, or did they dive into what you're doing from a diet and a lifestyle standpoint?
Well, I think that's what was most discouraging to me was I was just shocked because again, being raised, I will give credit to my parents at least that that they said food is powerful and what you eat will affect your body. And so even though I don't agree with what they were telling me to eat, which was more like a vegetarian diet and a lot of, like soy and things like that and fatty meat is bad, I will say they did, say that you really need to be educated on what you're eating. So one of my top questions, obviously, when I was seeing a lot, I saw over 4 gastroenterologists, outside of seeing general MDs and everything. And I asked every single one of them, don't you want to? The thing that just shocked me more than anything was their first question when I would come to see them was not like, take me through a day and what you're eating. When this is someone who's supposed to understand the gut and, all of these things, they never once, I would have to ask them. I would say, don't you want to know what I'm eating or what a day in my life looks like or what supplements I'm on. And all they would be asking me about is what medications, didn't even care what supplements. Even I could have been drinking, like, I don't know, ashwagandha powder and, any supplement in a high potent form could also be dangerous to the gut. And they wouldn't ask about supplements. They wouldn't ask
Mhm.
what food, quantities, what I was doing. Because again, I was doing something which I would never in a million years do now. Because again, all it was doing was putting tremendous stress on my body, which was eating an overwhelming amount of fiber that my body could not handle or digest with all of these heavy, kale smoothies, massive salads, roughage, raw vegetables, fiber, 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 high oxalates, all these different powders and potions and things that, again, my body had no ability to process. And additionally, on top of that, I was, I found fasting, which again, you have to be that fasting has a time and a place, I believe, and it can be, again, a beneficial healing tool or something great for certain men and women and also in certain times. So with women, you have to value and take into account menstrual cycles. If you're, in a high stress environment, men are typically much more resilient to that. But I, again, found it and was like, I'm going to go hardcore with the fasting. So I'm going to do OMAD. So I was doing intense veganism, high fiber OMAD. And if you want to talk about a bomb to your
Jeez.
digestive system, do that year after year after year. It cannot handle it. So my body was to the point where pretty much any time I would put food in it, it would just blow up. I mean, the bloating, pain, shooting pain in my stomach. It was so inflamed. It was like I felt like I had chugged Fireball and was just letting it sit in my stomach every time I ate. But again, getting back to the doctors, if you walk a gastroenterologist through that and that doesn't ring alarm bells, there's a problem. And 2 out of the 4 gastroenterologists I saw, I shared that with, not because they asked, but because I just offered that information, hoping it would shock them and maybe get me somewhere. And one lady told me to just take psyllium husk fiber to increase the bulk of fiber I was eating enough to properly eliminate it. So she sent me home with several fiber powders that she just wanted me to add into my protocol of massive fiber and eating along with it. And she said that would fix everything. And then the other gastroenterologist either just wanted to put me on a prescription medication, which I'd already tried those, and they had, again, my body was so sensitive to medications and things, they either made constipation worse or the pain symptoms worse, which then they just wanted to prescribe me a pain medication for, which my body did not respond well to either, similar to the antibiotics. And that's honestly really when I really ended up going down the animal based route, was because I was so discouraged by what I was seeing from these gastroenterologists in response to extreme fasting and a crazy vegan diet that they just didn't even bat an eye to. Not one of the 4 even said, maybe try lowering your fiber a little bit. No, no, no. Fiber is great. Like, I was eating over 600 plus grams of fiber a day. That's more than even like what's recommended
Dude.
in 2 weeks. Like, I know people, like, I
Oh
don't
my,
think people
yeah.
understand. Picture this, between 5 and 600 grams of fiber a day in one meal. So that is, I'm talking about bowls and bowls as big around as, like, you know, massive bowls of just, again, raw vegetables on all of this in one go. And it was this sort of and the reason why was because the vegan diet I couldn't get satisfied on. It was so, my version of it was so fat and protein deficient that I was just eating fiber and roughage to fill up my insatiable appetite. Because again, I had no proper fat or protein to satiate me. And so I would just get into the point where I was so bloated and in pain and full from the fiber to get me through to the next day. And it's pretty wild. But I thought I was crazy and alone in all this. And the number of people, a number of women, especially, that have reached out to me on my platform since I've had shared some of this journey and also on podcasts as well, have told me I'm doing the same thing. Like, I'm scared to give up the vegan diet, but I'm eating all this fiber and roughage. And I'm in pain and I'm fasting with it. And I've been told this is good. And it couldn't be further from the truth. It's wild. And it's wild to know also that I'm not alone and that there's a lot of people who are still very much told that this vegan, plant-based narrative, high fiber, low, low fat, high carb is the way to go. And it is a recipe for disaster.
So that's wild, but I want to dig into the medical provider aspect from a couple aspects. So I have a similar distrust is probably the wrong word, but I have a healthy skepticism when it comes to medical providers. Not from that standpoint, but from my athletic standpoint. I had a whole bunch of injuries, had a bunch of surgeries in high school and college from playing sports, and I would go to doctor after doctor after doctor who would not have an answer. And eventually we'd get to doctors that would be like, oh, yeah, you have tendonitis. And I'm like, bro, I literally have a sports medicine degree. And you're trying to tell me I have tendonitis right now. I'll fight you right now. Like, I would literally get so angry because I'm like, dude, all I want to do is be able to do something and not be in immense pain. Like, that's
Pain.
all I want right now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, like I'm at the point where I'm like begging you guys to do an exploratory surgery because I just want to not hurt anymore.
Hurts so
And
much.
you guys are like, yeah, just give it a little bit of rest. Do
We're
the
going to
RICE
pain.
protocol. Rest it, ice it, elevate it, compression,
Yep.
right? And I'm
Yeah.
like,
You're right.
so like
No.
that developed a distrust, right? And then you go to a general practitioner and you realize a general practitioner doesn't really know anything about anything,
No.
which to any general practitioners out there, I apologize, but it's true for the most part.
Yeah.
And so that's when I started being like, okay, I'm going to find my own stuff. Like, I was looking up studies on ulnar nerve issues because that was my big problem. And that's when I first started getting into studies, in addition to the education that I had. And so, similar story for you, right? You go through all these gastroenterologists, and not one of them even remotely asks the questions or goes down a route to figure out root causes. Do you think that, because I know you've done a whole bunch of research on your own and you're very well versed in this, what do you think is the cause of that? Do you think they're just in a place where they're not capable, or it's a combination of they're so heavily pushed to see patients, write prescriptions, that they A, don't have the time, and B, they don't have the resources to actually properly take care of somebody?
I think it's honestly a sad combination of two things. And the reason I say this is because I see it very similarly in the work I do. I do farm consulting work. So a lot of work trying to support small farmers with things like soil issues, pathogens, disease resistance, all of this. But the constant battle they're in is to survive and stay afloat above the big ag corporations we're all familiar with. I think a very similar sort of plague has hit the medical system, where honestly they are completely in bed with big pharma, and to both stay relevant, because big pharma, again, these drug companies that have so much influence, they've infiltrated all parts of our system, including the agricultural system. Like, I even have to deal with pharmaceutical industries in my line of field in agriculture, which is very messed up. Trying to kind of keep them at bay again. But to keep them happy, and again, from a money making perspective, these pharmaceutical companies have such a scary hold on doctors. And I have seen literally before me, because I have a lot of family in the medical field, um, a lot of these pharmaceutical industries going to medical professionals and saying, we will put you out of business if you don't promote, selling our drugs and promoting them, or saying that diet can alleviate issues more than this drug. Or so essentially boiling down to this, that if you promote that something like a carnivore diet could have the capability to heal you, instead of, prescribing my anti-inflammatory for your, pain that you were having, JT, or for Alex's gut issues she's having, we want you to prescribe that, because again, that makes them money, goes in their back pocket, keeps them in business, keeps things rolling, and then it keeps the doctor in his practice as well, so that he doesn't become obsolete as this demand continues to increase. So you have people getting sicker, then they become dependent on the medication, which still doesn't work, but they're told by the doctors that it will work, just keep taking it, brainwashing. And that, I hate to say that because I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but I've seen it firsthand time and time again. And I've also seen it in the work I do. And it's scary. It's scary to think that, I'm not saying they're all like this. There are good people out there that do work in the pharmaceutical industry, that are in the medical practice, that have good hearts and genuinely, are genuine and want to do it to make people the healthiest versions of themselves. But it's not the main narrative today, particularly in the US. There's just such a scary connection and interweaving between the pharmaceutical industry and the medical establishment now, particularly with like general MDs, especially. They will pretty much, either when you walk in, either refer you to someone else and just say, go see another gastroenterologist or another pain management clinic that they're affiliated with or whatever. Or they will just prescribe one of the many lines of, whether it's an antibiotic or drugs, that again they are affiliated with and or in partnership with when it comes to pharmaceuticals. So I think very much that's what I've both seen personally, what I see in the research I do, and I know just single hand from, especially from when I was on so many antibiotics, because I'm literally crying to the doctor saying, listen, I've been on this version of, penicillin or whatever, or naproxen or whatever, so many times. I'm still in so much pain. I'm telling you, it's not helping. It's making things worse. We can literally look at the lab results and they're worse. And then they will just let it go right over their heads. And they'll say to me, just keep trying it. We know that this is effective. Again, look at the sheet that we got from the pharmaceutical industry suppliers that provide this antibiotic. They say it's effective. It's, and all this. And you're just like, oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. You're not even listening to your patients at this point. So again, I hate to say, at that point, I very much realize that we've gotten to a point where, again, being your own health advocate, you can't just go in and trust immediately what someone tells you. And I have a high level of skepticism, like you said, where I just, after so many countless experiences like that, I have trouble trusting and or believing at that point because of it.
No, it's so true. And so a couple of years ago, had you told me that story, I would have been like, it's a little conspiracy theorist. It
Little woo
might be true, but
woo.
to be honest, I don't really care.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Be like,
Mhm.
that doesn't really affect me, and I don't really care right now. And for people like have a heart, that just wasn't like a focus of my life. And there's so many conspiracy theories that I can't, you know. And so when I got started into this, and I've told people this before, originally my whole goal was to just like post some food stuff, maybe some workout stuff, and be like, hey, check out eating meat. And then I started getting into it, and at first it was the big time hate and attack that people would get for eating this way. And I'm like, man, that's a little weird. Like, I
Yeah.
can't believe you would attack somebody for people telling you to A, get off medications, and B, just use food and
Yeah.
like stop, and you'll start feeling better. And I personally experienced this. I'm like, man, that's a little weird. And so then I started doing, a bunch more of my own research, started tracing some stuff back. I was on a powerful anti-inflammatory when I was 12 years old for elbow pain.
Mhm.
Okay, so when I was about 11, I tore my ulnar collateral ligament. For people that don't know, it's the ligament on the inside of your elbow, and that's what generates Tommy John surgery. Most people have heard of Tommy John, especially for baseball players. 11 years old, that happened. I was in so much pain from throwing, and I'm like, man, like, obviously I'm not thinking this, I'm 11. But thinking about it now, I'm like, man, I'm a literal kid, and I can't throw a
Kid.
baseball, which is my number one thing to do in my life. Like, that is my life. And it hurts me so bad to throw. And I have a doctor who prescribes me a medication that ends up being in a class action lawsuit a couple years later. And I honestly don't even remember. I wasn't a part of the lawsuit, but it was one of those ads. It's like, did you take this? And I was like, yeah,
And
I
you
think I
can
did
sue now,
actually. And they're
big time.
like, yeah, right. You might be
Yep.
for compensation from asbestos. And I'm like, wait, what? And so I'm like, man, that's crazy. So then I'm thinking about it and doing all this research. And I'm like, back then, the era that we grew up, I might be a little older than you, but not much. The era that we grew up, we didn't really have access to internet when we were growing up. Like,
No,
I had a
no.
little bit, like I had dial up, and then I had a little bit
Yes.
from dial up.
We had, in my
But
family, it
you
was like you
you
could
went
get
to the
15
doctor
minutes.
and you
Yeah.
yeah, right? They're like, I got
Yeah.
a phone call coming in. You can only have
Yeah.
10 minutes and then you're off for
Exactly.
the rest of the night.
Hmm.
But you didn't have this access to information. And so for a lot of my years, I didn't bother looking anything up because you just didn't look up information. If you wanted to know something, you'd look up an encyclopedia, or you would text the whatever that service was to ask a question, or Google came out and you're like, ooh, I could Google what 5 + 5 is,
Still use the yellow
But then I
pages.
start doing this research, right? Like look up the white page, reverse look somebody up, like find an address.
Yeah.
And then I get into Carnivore and I start experiencing all this pushback, and I'm like, man, this is weird. Like, I remember growing up to commercials like beef, it's what's for dinner. Like, why is this so controversial right now? And, I'm going on a long-winded rant here, but it really brought me back to what you were talking when a particular doctor on Twitter would constantly push the narrative that meat's going to raise your LDL, LDL is what kills you. And I'm like, man, like that doesn't sound right. And so I would digest the information and then look up studies. And then it finally clicked on me when the most quoted meta-analysis that he would bring up on LDL was this massive meta-analysis study out of Europe, the European Heart Association or something like that. And they looked at like 30 different studies, and it was over millions of people, and you know lots and lots and lots of years of data and research, and the data all pointed to the higher the LDL, the greater the chance of cardiac disease. And then I looked further and found the full text links, and then I went more and more, and then I discovered the conflicts of interest section, which normally a conflict of interest section is little. Like,
Yeah.
hey, this doctor got a free lunch from this company, and that. I saw this and I copied and pasted it and put it into Word, and it was something like 50 words long. I was like, man, that seems weird. So then I started finding common words in it, and pharmaceuticals like Merck, which is one of the largest statin producers, showed up
Yep.
11 times. And then Pfizer showed up. And then a whole bunch of these companies that I didn't recognize, and then I would Google and I'd find out they're statin manufacturers. And I'm like, this guy is literally fighting with people tooth and nail over LDL being the cause. And guess what is the one thing that we do to lower our LDL? We take statins. And guess who sponsored this study that you're fighting tooth and nail over? Statin companies. And then I was like,
Statin producers.
we might have a problem here, right? And then you
Yeah.
go in, and now every time I can look at a study, the latest study that came out, did you see the twin study with
Yes. Oh my
vegans
God.
and omnivorous diet? That was funded
Absolutely
by the
awful.
same foundation that funded Game Changers,
Game
which was the
changers.
vegan documentary. And I was like, no
Yes, I
kidding.
know.
Imagine
Imagine
that, right?
that.
And then you start looking at it, and it's so easy. I'm like, how is this possible right now? You got like diabetes research being funded by Kellogg, and you're like, people
Gosh,
are posting studies that are funded by Johnson and Johnson, and I'm like, what is
what's
happening right
happening?
now?
I know.
And it brings your point, like to bring it all, it completely erodes your faith in what a medical
And
professional is telling you. Like there are literally very few MDs that talk right now, and I'm not like skeptical right from the beginning.
yeah,
Like it blows me away. I'm like, you're supposed to be the epitome of
right.
trust in what we believe. And then you go back and realize that doctors used to recommend cigarettes. So then you're like, okay, maybe it has been all
Oh,
it.
yeah, okay, yeah,
But
exactly.
anyway, like circling it all back around, how did you start on this research? Like, how did you, for somebody that was being so committed to vegan, right? And so committed to the way that you're doing and convinced that this, yeah, I'm trying to help myself. How does that first study look like? Did you just Google what is the complete opposite of vegan and will that help?
A little bit, for me, it was a couple of things. I will give some credit to the work I was doing. Again, and being in agriculture, there's, thought of as two sides. You've got both plant agriculture and animal agriculture. And I was very much when I was in school and doing all of the work I did outside, first couple, I'd say a year or two after college, was sort of in this. There were these two camps of people that were really working in agriculture. The ones that were, if you're doing anything with livestock, like on your farm, if you are raising cattle and pork and all of that, like you are wrong. Like we should just have vegan farms where it is just plants and it's a big CSA of just vegetables and all of that. And I was in that camp because, again, I came into college with a background of being vegan. So I was convinced that you could farm vegan and that you could grow healthy plants and have healthy soil as a vegan, and that those things weren't essential to having proper nutrients both in your soil and in your food. And then when I started getting exposed to some of this animal based and carnivore narrative, I realized, oh my goodness, both with my soil science background, we have to have animals working in the soil and their manure and everything. All of those provide valuable nutrients that go into the soil that actually provide nutrients to the plants and then nutrients to the animals. And they are vital to that system. So it was realizing and kind of this epiphany of a true like circle of life, cheesy as it sounds, that we want to say includes when you're coming to growing practices, it has to include animals. You actually, there really aren't such things as vegan farms, where you have to source, if you're going to have a vegan farm, you have to source all these synthetic chemical additives and fertilizers because your soil is so deplete. It is not meant to be, again, naturally a system that works without those animal products, those animal byproducts, I'm sorry, coming in. And so realized very much deep in my heart that, okay, if I care so much about the environment, because, a big thing with vegans is save the planet. um, if I really actually do believe that, then I have to start supporting growing systems and small farmers that are either livestock based or understand the importance of having livestock involved, if they grow both plants and raise animals, because they're vital to that system. And then it was through that I realized, well, they're not just vital to that system, they're vital to my body. There's a reason that they work in that system, and there's a reason why my system requires animal products as well. It's not meant to operate same like a farm without those valuable nutrients coming in. So it was both actually research of for my health, but also this really big epiphany with my work that, these systems worked the way they did for generations and generations and generations before we did massive soybean and corn monocropping. We actually started very much with systems where you had some cattle, you had some chickens, you were using their byproducts, building up that soil, preventing erosion, strengthening the land that way. And that's why it worked so well for so long, and why we're having so many issues now trying to grow without them. And so, honestly, that's the first thing that really led me, because I was thought I was such an environmentalist, and so many vegans think they are, but it's practicing what you preach, and realizing I was being hypocritical by going to work and was managing a both livestock and vegetable farm, and then would go home and eat my massive salad with no animal protein and was sick and dying. And those two things didn't add up. So very much that was the biggest straw that broke the camel's back of breaking the veganism finally.
That's wild. That's super interesting because probably so for anybody that doesn't know I feel like Twitter's my dark side. Like, Twitter's where I argue with people, right?
Rant.
And
The
like
rant.
Twitter's where I'm just like, yeah, whatever, because it's so easy, right? Like I can find 50 posts and in a matter of 3 minutes fire off 50 tweets that are inflammatory that I know are going to get a whole bunch of responses and everybody's going to get up in arms. Oh, but it's super fun to me. Like I'm like sitting here like laughing. I'm like, oh, people are like, you're so mad, and I was like, I'm the farthest thing from mad right now. Like this is funny, but that's like the biggest thing, right? Is land use for animals, and then the fact that crops are, I think the figure they always throw out is 80% of crops are grown for animals, for animal feed. So when people now come, I'm assuming you made vegan friends, right? Like I feel like nobody goes vegan for that long without like developing.
Yep.
How do you respond to people that are like, oh my gosh, like you're doing this, and you're like, well, actually, this is my job, so
casual. I think what I always say to people when they come out, because they come, as you know, angry. They are ready to just punch you in the face with, you are trying to ruin the world now. I actually screenshot it. I will send it to you when we're done here. But I got this, I swear, like a novel long, all caps on Instagram DM. I get these sometimes from someone who is a vegan and extreme vegan who was just like, you have, absolutely gone insane. Who are you to think that what you're doing isn't absolutely just crushing the earth? And I always just say to these people, I give them a kind of nice, concise, short response. And I say, listen, for 12 years, I have empathy for you, and I understand where you're coming from. And you're not going to make me angry. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing you can say to make me start yelling at you, because I had that viewpoint for years. And I'm not going to sit here and try to convince you of otherwise, that I'm right, because for years I would have looked at podcasts like this and looked at research and thought the same thing. Thought, oh my goodness, these people are crazy. They are ruining the planet. Factory farming is going to kill us all and, ruin, again, plague the earth, which again, I don't agree with factory farming, but you get my point, animal products, all of this. And I just say, you're going to have to come to it in your own way, one way or another, that what you're saying, you will eventually not agree with, because nothing I can do can change a hellbent vegan, because I was one for years and I was convinced, fully convinced, nothing could take me away from my viewpoint. No person. I had deep, close relationships again that I'd formed, people that were worried about me for my health. You have to find your why as to why you want to give it up, because it wasn't that my health was literally it was a culmination of both my health and my work, and seeing it in front of my eyes. I've realized that everybody has a certain specific way where finally it tugs them at them long enough to where they realize it's not working for them. But I can't be the person to make that change for that person. They have to come to it on their own. And there's no point in me trying to rant back in all caps back at that person angrily, because I want to do that on first instinct because I want to get them better and out of that position as quickly as possible. But I know I can't, especially from afar when I don't know that person. I don't know where their head's at. And having, again, the empathy that I was once there too. And I couldn't be convinced by anybody. I had to convince myself. And that's, I think, what's crucial to have to come to terms with.
I think that's super important, and that's honestly why when I am having a discussion with somebody, I don't use studies very often at all. And
No.
there are
Yeah.
people who are like, cite the source, cite the source, where's the study, where's the study? And I'm like, well, here's the problem with a study. You can find a study that says red meat causes cancer. I can
Yeah.
find a study that says your study's full of crap. And then you can find a study that says diabetes causes cancer. And then I can find a study that says red meat is good for longevity, like it's associated with longevity. So there's no point, right?
And we
And
can go
anytime
back
people bring
and
that
back
up,
and back
be
and
like, I
back.
can go,
Yeah.
oh,
Forever.
and it's just this. It's, well, your research is bad and your research is bad, but mine is good and yours. And I'm like, here's the thing. I can go find you a research on PubMed that says drinking Coke is going to raise my testosterone.
Right.
And you're
Right.
like, wait, what? And I'm like,
Or
yeah,
that
stupid research.
Captain
I can
Crunch
also,
healthy. It's just, it's aware. Yeah. It's
this
the way it
this is
is.
my favorite research article I've ever seen, and it's the University of Chicago. It's not exactly a run-of-the-mill institute. They did a study on men who work out. I believe the figure was 7.5 hours, 5.5 or 7.5 hours a week or more. And they said if you are white as compared to black, you are 70% more likely to die early. Like,
Oh, oh,
you just posted a research article that said
oh.
because I'm white and I work out, I'm going to die earlier than this guy. What? And I'm like, this is the most absurd study I've ever. I'm like, I can literally find you a study on anything. So I don't. I don't post studies
I
very
know.
often.
Exactly.
Yeah, my whole point is I am not as nice as you. My whole point is to get them
I
to sound
know.
like an
No.
idiot, and then maybe they'll understand. I'm like, maybe if I just like spin you up a little bit, or
Yeah.
just dispel the silly notions, because that's most of what it is. It's like these silly notions that people have. I'm like, okay, well, that's just bad data, and this is why. Like, maybe you'll understand. Probably not, but I'm probably going to get some entertainment. A bunch of my followers are probably going to get some entertainment, and we're all going
Yeah.
to, feel happy in our little bubble. But it's so true that I don't think a vegan or a carnivore or anybody has ever been convinced to change, because we're at extremes, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
carnivores at one really extreme and vegans way at the other. Nobody has ever been convinced to give that up by somebody saying you're wrong and here's the study why.
So
And
true.
it's just like if you've ever had an addict or an alcoholic, like, yes, like sometimes you can, but never
At
is
the
the
end of the
case to be
day,
like, hey, bro, you got to
you
stop
will
drinking.
believe whatever you want to believe. If your mind is set in stone on something, it does not matter how scientifically proven it is. It doesn't matter how many people disagree with you. You you will stick with that as long as you want to, until, again, you come to something on your own that pulls at you enough. It's just true, like you said, because those things are all really
Yeah,
strong
and
factors.
because I could find research to, yeah, I can find research to back anything I want. And so I often will actually, I'll post studies with headlines and not offer any commentary whatsoever. And people will lose their mind
Yeah.
over it. Like, both ways. They're like, oh my gosh, this is the best thing ever. This proves everything. Like, the last one I did was the red meat kills cancer cells.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very, like, the scope of the study is very small. First of all, it was in mice. Second of all, it was TVA, and it was a correlation of seeing TVA attacking cancer cells. Now, could that potentially? Sure. Does that mean eating red meat is going to keep me from getting cancer? No.
No.
But I just posted the article. That's all I did. And people were like, "Oh my gosh, you're misleading your." And I was like, "What? Like seriously?" I had a bunch of vegans pop on, and they're like, "You're spreading disinformation and mis." I was like, "I literally just posted the article. Like, I didn't offer commentary. I didn't
I
say
didn't say
anything. I
one thing. I
literally
just
just posted it,
put it out there. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
right? And let people fight over it."
And that by itself is alone enough. They're like, but then you're putting it out there.
Yes.
You're just you putting it out there. You're promoting it.
Yeah.
How dare you? The nerve.
So is Fox News, but whatever.
Easier to get to you.
So one more thing that I know you do a lot of that I want to touch on because it's something that's a little bit in the carnivore community, but I think it could be more of is I know you're really big into grounding and getting sun. How has that helped you, and what is the mechanisms behind why that's an effective modality for you?
I like this question a lot. For me, I would say it's because one of the biggest epiphanies I've had is the mind body connection through all of this, that you cannot heal yourself as well if in your physical body if your mental health is in the toilet. If you are extremely depressed, anxious, stressed, and your whole mind is just completely out of whack, it's going to affect everything in your body. Your digestion will be off. You will be holding on to pain and swelling and, all kinds of things, stiffness. The two are interconnected. And for so long, both in the medical system and just in life in general, we have treated them as totally separate things. Again, if you go to your general MD, they're not going to say when you talk about stomach pain, well, maybe let's first talk about your stress levels and see if those could, be related. And so I realized again and again and again, time and time over, that I was so at the beginning of my journey, hyper focused on fixing the physical things. I've got to get my feet better that have been so broken down from all this endurance training and get my inflammation down. And I need to get my digestive system back in health, and was so focused on all those things. Well, that's great. But if I'm still facing, severe anxiety that I've had all my life, and the depression and just high stress, overtaxing sort of environment I'm in at work, and I don't address any of those variables with my mental health, I'm still going to be stressed when I go down to sit and eat that meal. I'm not going to digest it very well. I'm not going to sleep as well. Then my body's going to stay stressed, and the cycle is going to repeat where, again, both mind and body are totally out of kilter and aren't helping each other and aren't healing. And so it was that sort of hiccup I faced on my healing journey of realizing that I had to look and expand and broaden what I viewed as healing tools and do things for my mental health as well as my physical to help continue that improvement. So that was things like what brings me immense joy, the sun. And so part of when I moved to Florida about a year and a half ago, very seriously, part of the motive was to get more sunshine, to have more ability to be outdoors. I was living in a very cold environment before where it was heavy snow, a lot of darkness, and it just, I know, was affecting my mental health, and it was helping me, it was holding me back. And so was thankful that I was able to get in a position with my work where I could be transferred to Florida. For me, doing the littlest things during the day, which is even on days like today where it's been like lightning like crazy and storming, is just getting some fresh air, walking with my heavy rain coat on that's oversized and being drenched when I get back. But it's something that, again, it gets me where in the past I would have just sat in my house and ruminated and been anxious about the fact I couldn't get fresh air. And that was sabotaging my whole day. And so I view every day when I wake up as what can I do, whether it's a small or big thing for both my mental and physical health. And a lot of times that's tied to something like viewing sunlight or just putting my feet on the ground and feeling the earth and breathing, taking a few moments to just stop the constant, go, go, go of the day and getting back to my breath. Because I've noticed so much, particularly because I've faced so many digestive issues over the years, are that so many of my issues are correlated to high stress, not taking time to pause and breathe and just lower that nervous system activation that's on overdrive all the time and get like the vagus system, everything calm down a little bit. And so for me, I always just tell people it can sound a little woo woo, it can feel a little out there, and then you get used to doing it. But it can be something, again, as small as 2 minutes just walking outside, looking up. You'll see a lot of my stories on Instagram. I post little videos of the moon or of the sky because those things just bring me joy of seeing there's something greater than my health problems. There's something greater than what I sometimes tunnel vision into in my head when I feel overwhelmed, and putting things into perspective again and feeling a part of something bigger, feeling that I'm not alone and that I'm a part of, again, this great big nature bomb that we're on that's full of problems, but also a lot of beauty, and it encourages me. And so that's my kind of cheesy reasoning behind all of that. But it has been, again, a game changer for me to realize that my mental and physical health are one, and you can't have one piece without the other.
It's super true. And the sun thing. So I similar situation for different reasons. I moved from the Pacific Northwest, which is the
Oh,
rainiest, gloomiest place in the world,
the world,
uh,
practically, yeah.
truly. But for a solid 8 months out of the year, 7 months out of the year, um, people are like, "Oh, it's not really that bad." I kid you not. There was a year where it rained every single day in February. The entire month, every single day
I
had
couldn't do
recorded
it.
rainfall.
I love the Pacific
And in
Northwest.
Washington, no, so Washington is not like Florida. Like you get your rain all at once, right?
Yeah.
And then it stops.
Yep.
Washington gets their rain from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning the next day. And it
Constant.
might break, but it's still gray. It's still gray skies.
Yeah.
And never once would I ever suggest that I had seasonal depression. But I'm telling you, when I moved to Arizona, which may not be the sunshine state because you technically have more sun days, but we have more
Of
the
like the
strength
UV
of our
spectrum.
sunlight is,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, if you like factor that in,
Yeah.
I'm telling you, like it is 67 degrees right now and sunny, and the ability to walk outside, and it's
And
it
it's
just
everything.
being able to feel sunlight, you're like,
You're like a
okay,
whole new
like
person.
now,
Yeah.
yeah, now grounding's a little harder for me. Like the grass is mostly artificial here, so I'm like, I've asked a couple people, I was like, can I stand on like landscape rocks? Like,
Well,
does
no,
that count? Because that's all I got
that's
right now. Like,
yes. That's something I will tell people. I don't live like right off the beach. I sometimes grounding for me is literally like on the planks of wood outside my door. And I was listening to something from on a couple of podcasts recently where they were talking about the science behind grounding, and it can be on concrete. It can be it's again, it's just feeling rooted in whatever you're in. For me, it's even like grass is actually, there's not a lot of grass around here. I think there's a big misconception between grass and grounding. A lot of times for me, it's actually when I get to go to the beach, grounding in the sand, because that's very powerful. All of that energy from the ocean, and then feeling that in the sand, whatever it is. I think very much with grounding, it's again your mental perspective with it, like picturing yourself and envisioning yourself soaking up that energy from the earth, no matter what it is. But yeah, I'll see these people on Instagram with their gorgeous, lush green grass, feet planted. And I'm like, yeah, mine today is like some concrete slabs outside my little carriage house. So grounding can be many things.
I'm like, I'm not going in my yard because I've got astroturf. It's not
Yeah,
astroturf, it's artificial grass. I got artificial
that
grass,
might make
and
it
when it's
worse.
120 degrees outside, that thing's gonna burn the soles off my feet.
Exactly. Oh man.
Oh my gosh, it gets hot.
Mm-mm.
But that's fine. I'm fine because at the end of the day, even when it's 120, at 6 o'clock in the morning, I can still go outside and get sun, and it feels
Feels
perfect.
so good.
So
Yeah.
I totally believe with that. Um, One thing we didn't get to, but for anybody that's listening, in addition to all of this stuff, you do post like the best. Like every time you post something, I'm like, where you live is not real. It's not. There's no way that you're actually posting all of these ocean pictures, and that's a real place. That's the one thing I do miss a little bit. I'm a little bit landlocked here, not too
Yep.
far from. We're about 4 hours from a little gulf in Mexico,
Okay.
where we
So
can
it's
get to the ocean. But
a little bit, yeah, not too bad.
so I do miss the ocean a little bit. Um, but the one thing in addition to that is you literally post some of the best looking recipes and food I've ever seen. And I
Thank you.
don't typically make them because I don't do a whole lot of faux sweet stuff, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term. I'm pretty basic with my food. It's usually something to do with cheese or steak, and that's about it. But you do have amazing brown butter and keto stuff,
I'm
and
obsessed
I
with
don't even know
brown.
how you. Part of
Like,
me,
die and let me just be bathed in brown butter as a river of brown butter. Yep. I
I have never tried it. I have
Oh
never
my
done it.
gosh. Don't tell me such things. No. It's so simple. I mean, literally, what all brown butter is slowly overheat, taking a stick of butter and just stirring it in the pan until it gets that light golden brown, taking it off before it burns. And then you can freeze that. And then it's like a fudgy, like literally carnivore fudge. It tastes like that. You can add a little stevia or sweetener if you want it sweet. But half the time, I'll just eat the brown butter like that straight out of the freezer or make it a melty, like kind of caramel over anything. But what you said that was interesting with the sweet desserts is that, or not, when I say sweet again for the viewers, I'm not putting sugar or anything on these. And a lot of times I don't even use stevia because I don't have the crazy sugar addictions that I used to have. But for me, a lot of that was just because I've always enjoyed cooking both sweet and savory recipes. Like, I just, nothing brings me more joy sometimes than making a delicious meal or dessert and sharing it with people and them enjoying it and like experimenting. For me, it's all an experiment. I think that's kind of the soil sciencey background that I have, that I love experimenting with like anything and viewing it all as sort of who knows what's going to happen. But to be honest, I'm actually, if I had to pick one, very much like through and through a savory gal. Like, I love seafood, beef. Those things will always be the staple in my diet. And I was very, very much strict, particularly during carnivore, with, like you said, much more of a steak, butter, eggs, kind of B and E style of eating. And I'm planning on kind of transitioning in the next, probably honestly for this coming month, finishing out 2023, much more of that style. But main reason I share so much of this is because it brings people in to incorporating more protein in their diet, or in getting off of sugary desserts that are terrible for them, or, trying out more animal products, things like that. So I love sharing those things because then people reach out to me and say, well, maybe this will help me curb my, Walmart chocolate muffin 5 a day addiction, by trying your Equip Foods chocolate mug cake, or something like that, or doing a raw milk ice cream instead. So I love making them and then sharing them because I also just hope it helps people with their health as well, because there's nothing more rewarding, as I'm sure you agree, with sharing, what's helped you with others or things that could help them. So that's a big part of it as well.
100%. And for anybody listening, if you guys, most of you probably follow because of some food reel that I posted. If you at all enjoy any food reels that I post, Alex's food, I'm
By the way,
telling you,
yours are
like that.
incredible.
Yours,
Always.
I appreciate that, but yours is the one that first of all, when I look at it, I'm like, how in the heck do you have time to cook this much? And then I'm like, my goodness, like, I don't even, half the time, I don't even get into the ingredients because I'm convinced that they're not actually real. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm going to burst my bubble if I actually look into this and
I would be
find out that she
disappointed.
uses flour and 6 cups of sugar.
Right, right.
Right?
That's the thing,
She
is a
doesn't,
lot
I
of times
promise.
I'll have people reach out
But
to me. They're like, you didn't post the recipe for this. You just posted a picture. And I'm like, it's because I'm trying to the recipe 3 times in a row just to make sure that it actually works for you. Because I'm always so scared it's not going to work. And then I don't want to discourage someone even more.
Like, so I made this recipe and it was the worst thing I've ever had in
Worst
my
thing
life. This
ever.
is BS.
She's lying.
So people that want to follow you, where are you on social media? What are your handles? How do they find out more?
So I'll be honest, I'm a total grandma when it comes to technology and social media. I tried TikTok and for the life of me could not get into it. I couldn't stand it. And so I had the same handle on TikTok, which I still have the account, but it's not active, which is Healing by the Sun, all one word. So HealingByThesun. That's my Instagram handle. Instagram is my platform. I love Instagram because again, it's a culmination of like photos and you do captions and things, and it doesn't overwhelm me too much. Although I'm trying to get into reels now because I haven't. I just do again old fashioned granny style like posting, and that's it, or mostly on my stories. Like that's all I know how to do. But I don't do Facebook, I don't do Twitter, none of it. So if you want to find me, Instagram is my place. Healing by the Sun.
I highly, highly recommend it. I have been pushing her to do reels for a while. Don't worry, it's going to happen.
It's gonna happen.
Uh,
Promise.
but I really, really, it is. I really appreciate you being on, Alex. Had a lot of fun with this. Everybody go give her a follow, Healing by the Sun. I'll tag her, especially for those people on Instagram. For everybody listening, I really appreciate it. Like, subscribe, leave a review. Thank you guys very much, and we will see you next time.